there is definitely a time and place in life when you have to be able to flip that switch and go all out. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Monday Morning Moments with Mark. I hope this finds you well. This week we're going to be talking about max effort, as you saw in the open, and what it can mean to other aspects of your life becoming detrimental just because you put so much effort into any one thing. Um, but before we get into that, let's talk about the funniest thing. The funniest thing this week was actually something more ironic than funny. I was at church yesterday, and the praise band's up there, and they're doing their thing, and I really enjoy their music. And then I look up there, and I realize, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's my son's girlfriend. So they come back to their pew, and I'm like, yep, that's her. And so after the service, they're getting ready to leave, and they walk by, and I'm like, hey. And she just kind of gives me one of these things. Hi. I'm like, okay. I know she has plans to come over to the house later. But that was kind of awkward. And her and her family go walking on, and I get ready to leave, and they kind of stop, and she's like, I think, I guess she's talking to her family. She's like, I think that's Mitchell's dad. And I'm like, so as I approached them, I'm like, hi, are you just not going to acknowledge me? Like, you don't have plans to come over later? And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't really sure it was you. I was like, yeah, because they're completely different outside of my house. But I get it. She wasn't expecting to run into me in that environment because after all the time we've been going there, it didn't even dawn on me myself that, that she does this. So at any rate, it was an ironic moment, and it gave me a great opportunity to get to meet her family. So that was pretty awesome. Talking about max effort though for this week, with max effort, there is definitely a time and place in life when you have to be able to flip that switch and go all out, everything. But those instances are pretty rare, or should be pretty rare, and usually involve living and dying. Okay. Or in some cases, it might be everything it's all here right now, like the moment of a championship or the end of a game or something like that. But even then, there has to be a degree of balance to it. So max effort is when you have exerted so much effort into something that you are no longer as effective as you could be. Basically, meaning that I've invested so much into this that if I push any farther than this, I will no longer be capable of performing, responsibilities elsewhere. So in business, a lot of times this is associated to the point of diminishing returns, where you've invested so heavily into something, and the value has grown, but at a certain point it starts to taper off, and you have to make a decision of whether or not you're going to investigate that or invest in that anymore. And that apex of the value is when you've reached the point of max effort, the equivalent of max effort. In sports, it's a similar thing. And as a former coach, I'm guilty as charged of saying, hey, make sure you give 100%. But the reality of it is, I stopped saying that to my players, because when you're talking about physical effort, if you give 100%, you'll actually die because you've given up all of the energy in your body. And honestly, most of the time the body starts to shut down before that, and you see it in cramps and passing out and things like that. You can't really truly give 100%. So there's that. But when we're talking about that giving that max effort in the moment, and so for example, in the short term, when you talk about players and on your roster, and you have your starters and your backups. Well, the starter, his ability, his contribution, his max effort at 75%, capacity is probably still better than the next the guy on the bench is 100%, even though he's fresh. And you have to balance that line. But when we talk about that in the long term, it becomes a different scenario when we talk about guys playing through injuries and excessive fatigue and things like that. And then as seasons linger on and you're not available, or you're not able to give your full capability at the end of the season, when things are really important, and not available in critical moments. And that can happen in our lives too as well. So if you're not in the business or sports or whatever, when you're talking about that in your life, and you want to make sure that you're always available in the critical moments. So the only way to do that is to prevent burnout and take care to not always be giving max effort all the time, because what's going to happen is you're going to lose your physical and mental wellness over time, and even your spiritual wellness. um, if you continue to give this max effort all the time, and you live at that high operational tempo level, then and you'll see that happen. And when the critical moment comes along, you don't have the energy to give to it. And that's really, that's where things start to become detrimental. So how do we avoid that? It's really about dependent on conditioning and stamina and building resilience, but most importantly, it's about maintaining balance. It's about being able to, keep your effort levels kind of equivalent in all areas of your life. Well, I can give, you know, 25% here, 30% there, 20% here, and 30% over there, however the math works out, but kind of keeping it kind of balanced. And you can sort of take a little from this area and contribute more there. But in reality, if you talk about your physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, and social wellness, then honestly, you should only ever be operating at about 20% to stay on balance throughout that. And when you have to surge max effort in other areas, I need to be, this requires more physical effort out of me. Then it has to come from somewhere else. And we got to understand that. But it's that balance across them that allows you to have the ability to build conditioning, stamina, resilience, and then ultimately when those critical moments come, being able to flip that switch. But you have to always be careful about giving too much max effort and make sure that it's not being detrimental to other areas of your life. So I caution you to go out into the world this week and try and live a little bit more on balance and be cognizant of when and where you need to give your max effort. I promise you, it's not all the time and it's not everywhere. Have a great week.